Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are picking back up again with the conclusion of Spider-Man. Yes, we are. We are wrapping up the Spider-Man event, and this is probably the single most important part of the story. Not necessarily because of what's happened so far, but because of the future of Miles Morales. So what we end up doing here is we initially pick up with Mysterio, and Mysterio is suffering from the same problem that every supervillain suffers from: stupidity. So the idea behind this with Mysterio, is that he comes to the realization that he actually unintentionally defeated Spider-Man. That with Spider-Man being whisked off into this other dimension where Peter Parker in that reality is dead, that it leaves no Spider-Man in this universe, right? In the main Marvel universe. There is no Peter Parker here, right? He's off in the Ultimate Universe somewhere. And it was something that Mysterio had not really thought of before. And now he realizes it, like, man, dude, okay, like I actually defeated Spider-Man. But then the question becomes, why isn't it enough? Right? Like, why is it not enough? He's like, I have to see it, right? I have to see him suffer and die. I'll just take a peek for myself just for one moment. Now, this is Brian Michael Bendis being Brian Michael Bendis. If it were me writing the story, it would be like, oh man, dude, I won, cool, the end. And that would be it, right? It would be Mysterio realizing he basically got the upper hand on Peter Parker and there's no more Spider-Man here. Such as it is, Bendis wanted to tell the story. And so basically Mysterio comes to the realization that he wants to actually see Spider-Man suffer and die. And so he basically reactivates the portal and takes a peek inside, only for webbing to come flying out and to basically attach itself to him. And then of course you have Peter Parker, you have Miles Morales, and the Ultimates team who's there, right? The Ultimate Avengers who are all there. And it's kind of like, well, crap, right? Like, well, damn, like that's basically it, right? Like, okay, I mean, who could have possibly seen that coming? The cool thing about this though, is that one thing to understand with Mysterio is he's usually always got an ace up his sleeve. And that's one of the things that makes him so dangerous, right? And so where you have Nick Fury, you've got the rest of the guys who are kind of like, cool, the day's saved. Keep in mind, they're not used to the kind of villains you have in the main Marvel universe where somehow they always have some kind of an escape plan or something like that. Remember, the main Marvel universe is a lot less realistic than the Ultimate Universe was. And so Mysterio immediately types away and just starts releasing a whole host of these chemicals and sets off an explosion. And when that happens, basically everybody here, so like Iron Man, Nick Fury, Miles Morales, all these various guys are met by what are essentially their worst nightmares, right? That's literally what they're exposed to. Using the power of Mysterio, he exposes all of them to their worst nightmares, right? So you've got all the Ultimates who were dead at the hands of Tony Stark, which of course is definitely an allusion to what we saw in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You've got Nick Fury who's watching the world on fire, watching the world burn. Green Goblin has killed Aunt May in front of, really Dr. Octopus and Green Goblin have killed Aunt May in front of Spider-Man. And then you've got the Prowler who killed Miles Morales' mother and father. And so because of that, where everybody else is kind of succumbing to this, Miles sort of succumbs to it a little bit, but then manages to get the upper hand on it, even if only for a moment. And when that happens, he realizes Mysterio's making a break for the portal and he tackles Mysterio. Now, by all standards of measurement, Miles should have been 100% incapacitated here. And again, that's kind of the critique of Bendis, right? Bendis is just, well, of course Miles Morales has to be on top. He's the guy that I'm writing right now. He's the main Spider-Man. We can't have him lose, right? So it's kind of like, okay, you know, it's sort of, you just kind of go with it in this story, right? It's just kind of the way that Bendis does it. But where you end up having Mysterio, who of course uses his powers on Miles yet again, he almost gets the upper hand. Miles dodges the attack, goes invisible, and then Mysterio, trying to figure out what happens, ends up being attacked by Miles again. Now, again, this is kind of Bendis basically saying like, this is how capable Miles is. Now, the reality of this is that while this was kind of, I wouldn't say far-fetched, but kind of like, what in the world's going on here? You know, back in the day, in this day and age, it's common practice, and it kind of makes sense. I think that with this story and Miles being able to overcome Mysterio so fast, despite Mysterio's abilities, was really more of just Bendis wanting to tell the story, as opposed to just kind of letting it play out organically. In reality, having somebody like Mysterio was probably not the best bet. It probably should have been somebody more like Dr. Octopus, because Mysterio's powers are not limited to just some kind of tentacles attached to his back that go after you, that he messes with your mind, he messes with your head. And so there isn't really a whole lot of reason to believe that Miles would somehow be able to overcome this so quickly, right? If you're trying to maintain that kind of comic book lore that we're used to and kind of maintain consistency, then, you know, it's something you would kind of expect. But with Peter Parker able to overcome it as well, alongside Miles, they take out Mysterio pretty quickly, right? He's defeated pretty fast. And so from that point, what they end up doing is actually keeping Mysterio inside the Ultimate Universe. And the reason why is because Mysterio now knows that Peter Parker's Spider-Man. And so it kind of creates this situation where Peter's like, okay, cool, yeah, man, hold on to him. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for looking out. It's kind of a shady thing to do. But this is really the most important moment that comes out of this, right? Which is why we kind of more or less ham-fisted our way through this. There's a point where Peter and Miles are talking, and Peter basically thanks him for keeping the legacy of Spider-Man going. And when Miles asks him, like, does that mean that I have your blessing? Peter's like, absolutely. This was Brian Michael Bendis giving a big middle finger to the naysayers. And we talked about that before, that when Miles first showed up, there were a lot of people who were really pissy about the fact that Peter Parker in the Ultimate Universe had been killed. And they didn't want Miles, they wanted Peter Parker. The response of Bendis is, you already have Peter Parker. You've had him for like 50 years, right? You've had Peter Parker for a long, long time. You need to get over yourselves, right? It's time for a new Spider-Man. It's time to kind of continue on this story, focusing on somebody else. We can't do that in the main Marvel Universe because Peter Parker is etched in stone forevermore, the Spider-Man in the main Marvel Universe. We can't change that. Marvel editorial won't let me change it, and even if I wanted to, it'd be a terrible idea to do it anyway. But in the Ultimate Universe, I created this character. Bendis giveth, Bendis taketh away. And that's kind of his stance on that. And so when you had a lot of people who were giving him flack and really complaining a lot on the various forum boards and social media, different things like that, about Miles Morales taking over the role of Spider-Man in the Ultimate Universe, this was really Bendis saying, no, he's not going anywhere, right? If what you expected me to do was to basically give in, acquiesce, and admit defeat and say, hey, you 50 comic book fans who sound like 5 million, obviously you guys don't like Miles Morales, so let me just get rid of him and bring back Peter Parker. If that's what you were expecting, then I'm sorry, you're gravely mistaken. That's not what's going to happen. And so we ended up just getting Miles Morales going forward. And so it's one of these things where with Miles kind of getting the official blessing of Peter Parker, that you have this moment where Nick Fury kind of pulls him aside and says, you got his blessing, man. Like, you earned it, kid, right? If that Spider-Man, the real true Spider-Man, gives you his blessing, then you're good, right? Just go forward and do your superhero thing. So it's really not anymore of Nick Fury kind of questioning Miles anymore, kind of looking at him with a skewed eye, or really the only eye you can look at him with, and just kind of, his one good eye, kind of look at him with a skewed eye, and then just kind of being like, is he really gonna be a good Spider-Man? At this point, he kind of goes forward with a whole new level of confidence that he didn't really have before. And that's kind of a cool thing, because what you do is you switch over to Peter Parker himself back home, right back in his own apartment. He's like, Miles Morales. I wonder if we have a Miles Morales in the main Marvel Universe. And then it ends. Now, of course, we know, as far as I'm aware, that's not true in Marvel Comics, right? The story was told like 8 years ago. So we know that's not really true. At the time this was written, everybody wanted to know if it was true or not. It was like the biggest cliffhanger of like a decade, right? Like, I wonder if they really do have a Miles Morales in the main Marvel Universe. And it's like, I wonder what's gonna happen with that, right? It's kind of crazy, but it is a cool story. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Did you guys enjoy Spider-Man, the very first story, the very first time where Peter Parker and Miles Morales meet one another? Let me know what you guys think. I'm kind of curious what your all stance is. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.